Welcome to the Triclinium, a podcast named after the three-sided table used in the Lord's Supper, where you are invited to join the three of us as we think through matters of Christian faith, practice, and community. My name is Nate Lead, and I'm here, as always, with my co-hosts Eric Bergers and Jacob Hawley. And today, we are going to be discussing, what was it? It's not the fruits of the Spirit.
Oh, no, we're going to talk about gifts of the Spirit.
Something of the Spirit. So
we're going to be talking, what are we talking about?
Yeah, I was like, wait, what was it? Something of the Spirit, and a blank just came to my mind. So whatever.
Guys, we had to do the intro to this 3 different times because people keep laughing, and it's oh my gosh, it's craziness.
No, we gotta restart.
Yeah. So we're keeping it. This is great.
No, we're not keeping it.
We're in it now. We're a minute and 20 in. We gotta keep going.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I don't care.
So anyway,
oh my gosh,
how are you guys doing?
Eric has had some Wi-Fi difficulties during this recording, and he, as soon as we clapped to start, your recording, or at least your streaming, like went out, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?"
Not
and so
joking.
I don't even know.
As soon as you said Eric has Wi-Fi problems, you both cut out. Second you said that, you just came back just now.
Oh my god! So Eric's gonna be on a 30-second delay for this entire conversation. Hope that's fun for you. But yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I got to go to a student's graduation today, and also got to go hang out with a student and his friends when they went to a footbridge along the Wilson River. So it's pretty cool. Got a lot, but I had sunscreen in my eyes for most of the day, and it has been killing me. Oh my gosh, sunscreen. This has never happened to me before. I have never had problems with sunscreen in my eyes, and today it was like 25 years of not having problems with sunscreen in my eyes all came on once. It was like 2 hours of trying to get the sunscreen out of my eyes. Anyways.
That's a lot.
It was too much.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Well, at least now you're indoors where sunscreen can't hurt you.
Yes. I had to rub my face with a towel and then a washcloth, and it was a whole ordeal.
Eric, how are you doing?
I'm good. Nothing's been going on for me, so I don't really have much to share, but I'm doing
Very
fine.
Nice.
Yeah, nothing's going on for Eric. Nothing at all.
I don't think,
at all.
Is there something going on? I don't.
Never mind. Whatever. I can't believe you don't remember what we're talking about, but whatever. That's fine.
Oh, there could be 2 things that you're talking about, but I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
It's the one you talked about last time. Never mind. It doesn't matter. Oh my gosh, we're all over the place. Yeah, Nate, how are you?
This is a silly episode.
We're a silly episode today.
Yeah, no, I've been doing good. I feel like I've been going through my quarter life crisis. Recently, last 2 days, I came home and I told Lauren, I was like, I really want to buy and then upgrade and build out a camper van.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
No, I was like, that's what I want to do. And so I've spent too much time on Facebook Marketplace looking at used vans to build out into like a little camper mobile, that we can take on weekend camping trips and whatnot. And then in my mind, I was like, we can rent it out, while we're not using it. It'll be great. And then eventually I was just like, that seems like a silly idea. And then today, Lauren and I were driving to pick up our little puppy Henry from his haircut, and we saw this old Jeep Wrangler on the side of the road, and we pulled over and we looked at it, and it was only $4,000, and it was awesome. It was a sweet Jeep Wrangler, and so I was going back and forth in my head. I was like, oh, should we buy it? I was like, I kind of really want it. And I found it on Facebook Marketplace, actually, found the ad. And I had the ad up, and Lauren and I were going through a couple different scenarios of like, okay, how can we make this work? And then I refreshed the page, and it had sold. And I was like, that sucks. I'm still frustrated about it, so much so that I wanted to talk about it with you guys and just say how frustrated I am. So
yeah, that's
anyway,
really irritating.
It's been a roller coaster of emotions the last 2 days because I'm like, we're buying a van, and then I'm like, we're not buying a van, and we can't do that ever. And I'm like, we're buying a Jeep, and we can't buy a Jeep, and we'll never be able to buy a Jeep. And So
Maybe consider buying a scooter next. It seems
yes.
like the transportation is descending, so try a scooter next.
Yes, around my birthday, I was like, I want to buy a motorcycle, and I want to fix up a motorcycle, an old Honda CB like motorcycle, and so I was looking around for that. That's $1,000, and I was like, I just don't want to do that.
Have
right
you
now.
considered a Razor scooter?
Oh, that kind of scooter?
Yes.
That's way
I
too
do not.
That's way too much mechanics involved. I would recommend Heelys.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, dude. Some Heelys, dude. I mean, we all had that kid at our school who had Heelys, and it was like,
Oh, it was
I mean,
me, dude.
talk of the town, right? It was you?
I had Heelys in elementary school for a little while. Yeah.
Do you still have your Heelys somewhere?
No, they're long gone.
Because they would probably fit me, so I'm just saying. If you could sell me your Heelys.
I had Heelys.
We'll talk after the podcast.
And then I also had a pair of shoes where I carved out of the soles like a little section so I could put the Heelys in those shoes.
Did it work?
I think so, yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
That doesn't seem like something that would go well. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like something that you would try and you'd be like, I bet I could do this, and then it would like,
Well, I'm sure, like, my
dig into
mom-
your heel weird. And
I'm sure like my mom
break.
helped me or something like that. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
probably
remember
so.
it working, yeah.
That's wild. Oh my gosh. Well, so today we're going to be talking again about the spiritual gifts because we felt like last time we spent like an hour talking about tongues and then 10 minutes talking about like prophecy and all the other cool stuff. So anyhow, just to like reiterate kind of where we went with last week or 2 weeks ago, was it? No, it was last week's episode. Eric's position is he's pretty skeptical about the spiritual gifts persisting to this day. Nate, how would you describe where you're at right now after our conversation last time?
I think after our conversation, I think that I am more in favor of the spiritual gifts continuing, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is my position. I think they continue, but I have some pretty big caveats on what I think they mean. So if you want more details on that, I'm sure it'll come up some more in this episode. But I would not adhere to like a mainstream charismaticism in the same way. So
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Yeah, and I should say I'm still a little skeptical as well, but more on the like I'm probably like 53-47 continuationist.
Okay.
I'm pretty split right now, but I lean continuationist. Yeah.
Okay, wow, that is a very precise number. 53-47. I mean,
I wouldn't
good
say
night.
51-49 because that's too close. You know, I wouldn't say 50-50 either.
A little bit of
just
cushion
had
in
47.
there.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah,
give
a
it some
little
room.
cushion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little breathing space in there.
I'm on the 53-yard line instead of the 50-yard line.
Yeah. So, we started talking about apostleship and prophecy right before we ended last episode. And so to kind of reiterate a little bit, like, one of the passages that Eric brought up as kind of a reproof or a rebuttal to charismaticism in general is that he said there is a passage. It's in Ephesians, right?
I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure on the top of my head.
Go look it up really
Yeah,
fast.
I think it was.
We're not prepared at all today.
I think it was Ephesians, or it might have been First Timothy as well. I forget.
Okay. So the passage basically says that that Christ is the cornerstone and the foundation of the church is built upon the apostles and the prophets. And the debate that we were having is, what does that mean? Does that mean that there is no such thing anymore as an apostle and a prophet because the foundation has already been laid? Or when they talk about the foundation being laid on the apostles and prophets, is that just referring to the specific prophets of the Old Testament and the specific apostles, like Jesus's 12?
It's Ephesians 2:20, by the way.
Ephesians 2:20. Will you read it for us?
Yes. as soon as I put it away.
Yes, that's fine.
It says, oh, hold on. It kind of ties in to 19 as well. It says,
Have a little fruit fly on
consequently,
my
you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and also members of his household. And then verse 20 says, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets with Christ Jesus himself as chief cornerstone. So,
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead and finish your point, and maybe I can say something.
No, I was just recapping. So that's kind of the text that we've been talking about, and kind of then going into what does it mean to be a prophet? What does it mean to be an apostle? What were their roles? What was their position? And that's kind of where we ended. And we talked a little bit offline as well, in between this episode and last. So
I find myself sitting here
Eric,
wanting to talk about that more, to be honest.
Go ahead. Yeah. Eric, so why don't you jump in on this?
Should we? So here's
yeah.
the thing.
What?
So here's the thing, just about that text in particular, because it's still it's still kind of the crux for me at the moment.
Okay.
But so here's the thing. We spent the first portion talking about tongues and things like that because if we're going to move on here and talk about prophecy and healing and things like that, it's probably going to be 99% practical things that we're going to talk about with the two, which was pretty much 99% of us talking about tongues, because this is such a practical thing. The reason why I think Ephesians 2:20 is important, or if you have texts in favor for yourself, to support as well, is because there has to be a foundation for the practical nature of what's moving forwards. So Ephesians 2:20 is so important because we can spend all day talking about, well, did tongues look like this or did it look like that? Did prophecy look like this or did it look like that? How does it look like today? Right. Same thing with healings, but none of that is really matters, I guess, if there's no foundational basis for it at the beginning. So that's why I would want to keep talking about that, because I think it's important, for people if they're trying to discern these issues for themselves or something like that.
Yeah.
But because I was sitting here thinking, and my brain was kind of pooped out by the time we were talking about that at the end of the conversation. So I don't know what you guys think, but it could be useful to keep talking about that and maybe something else related to that. But I'm also willing to talk about prophecy if we want to just move on as well.
No, I think that's important. So let's go ahead and dive deeper into that conversation.
Yeah. So I was just sitting here thinking, I want to hear what you guys have in response to this, because I think if I remember right, when we kind of left off last time, the reason why Ephesians 2:20 is such a huge thing for me is because kind of the nature of what's these particular signs are and how I view the nature of signs themselves. So when you go back, and this is what I was thinking about just now, if you consider the Old Testament as well, if my memory serves me right, there's not very many years, a very small amount of time occurs when blatant signs are being performed in the Old Testament period and into the New, and they serve a very particular purpose, namely to authenticate the message and or ministry of the individual who's acting on behalf of God as his representative to the certain people. So, for example, you have in the Old Testament, say you have Elijah who's he puts wood on the ground and soaks it or whatever, and then God lights it on fire, and it serves as a authentication against the wicked prophets of Baal.
For sure.
Against them. And that's authenticating Elijah's message to the people he's interacting with. The same is the same seems particularly true with the way that Christ treats signs and miracles as well. I'm not saying it's the only function for these people, but it's a huge part of it, where there's even a text, correct me if I'm wrong here, where Jesus is like, if you don't believe the words that he's speaking to the Pharisees, he says, if you're not believing the words that I'm saying to you and the message that I'm bringing to you, at least believe the signs and the miracles. Believe the works that I'm doing in my Father's name.
Right.
Because they testify to who I am and what I'm saying to you. And so that kind of serves as to show that, there's something within the nature of signs and miracles themselves serves as an authenticating mechanism for the message and ministry of the person. And so with that kind of serving in the background, that seems really clear to me, like throughout the Old Testament and into the New, that's a huge part of what signs and miracles are. And so when you come across a text like Ephesians 2:20, where it's saying the church is built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, what I was trying to get at there is like, what is the nature of signs and miracles? What are they even for? What are they supposed to do other than just be a miracle in and of itself, which doesn't seem to be the case biblically to me. There's something beyond that that I think is with it. And if they're used in this sort of way, that would seem to lend credence to the idea that these particular things were used in a special way in the New Testament, particularly with the apostles, and that as they die off, it would make sense that the gifts part ways with Christians moving forward, because there's no more capital A apostles and prophets, because the foundation was already laid. Okay, long-winded, but I hope that made sense.
Well, I think I've got a response, but I want to ask Nate first as a convert to continuationism. What do you think? What do you think to what he's just said?
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I was listening, but it was taking a backseat because I found an article that was talking about the verse Ephesians 2:20.
Okay.
So I was reading through that. I apologize. So sorry about that.
No, you're fine. That's fine. I'm glad you're doing research. So I would say, I think that in the listing of gifts, and let me pull it up again just so I have it in front of me so I'm not speaking contemporaneously. Lists of spiritual giftings. What I was going to say, though, is I think within the listing of spiritual giftings, you have this fascinating thing where prophecy is actually divided from miracles. This is 1 Corinthians 12. Both are listed. Miracles and prophecy are both listed. And so when I ask the question, does prophecy necessitate miracles? Do signs and symbols have to follow prophecy? I would say they don't, because there's that division in 1 Corinthians 12. Paul seemed to see prophecy and signs or miracles as being not inextricably bound to each other. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so, but you're gonna I don't think that's enough of a response to what I'm saying. You're gonna have to flesh out what that means a little more, because it's okay to, maybe I should just let you respond rather than saying something.
Well, no, so okay, so let's take that as the first piece then. What I would just say is I don't think that to be a prophet requires you to be able to do signs and miracles. And so I actually would see prophecy and signs as being more cousins than two sides of the same coin. They are often found together, but they're not the in the same way that you could say like evangelism and what I would consider like apostleship or missionary behavior are often found hand in hand, but they're not the same thing. They're not identical. So I would say if you're asking the question of like why don't we see authenticating signs that go alongside the prophets, or like why, you know, what does it really mean to be a prophet? I would say it does not have to do with miracles. So it's a non-essential piece of prophecy.
Okay. What was the text that you mentioned there, really quick, just so I can
1
have
Corinthians chapter 12.
Okay, just so I could have it in front of my face. So I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying here. You're saying 1 Corinthians 12. What verse again?
So this one is in verse 10. So it says, I'll back up to the sentence start. So it says, to one there is given through the Spirit a message of wisdom, to another a message of knowledge by means of the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by that one Spirit, to another miraculous powers, and to another prophecy, to another distinguishing between spirits, right? So there's a separation.
A separation of the gifts?
A separation of specifically signs, miraculous signs, healings, things like that, and prophecy, so that the two don't have to accord in the same individual. I do believe both persist, miracles and prophecy. I just don't think that being a prophet requires you to do miracles. Am I misunderstanding your critique?
I think you might be. Go
ahead and restate your critique for me.
Because let me put it this way. If what you're saying is that miracles could be done just for the sake of doing miracles, so for example, Paul walks up to somebody on the side of the street, heals them from whatever illness that they have, and says, okay, have a good day, and just moves on, and there's nothing attached to it. Like, I guess he could do that if he wanted to, and God like had it out that that was going to be the case. But biblically speaking, what I'm saying is Paul likely would have preached the gospel message to that person, and the sign was, or the miracle that was worked points to the reality of the message that he's giving. So the sign...
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I agree with you there.
Yes.
Yeah, signs always authenticate the gospel message.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean necessarily the prophecy. Those are not the same. So I would say like you could be a shepherd teacher, you could be an evangelist, you could be an apostle, you could be a prophet, and you could and it could be that signs and miracles follow what you're speaking, because all of those have to do with the ministry of the word, right? But it's not like a specific marking of prophecy or apostleship.
Okay.
Because miracles can follow evangelists or apostles.
Yes.
Yeah. Or
Okay.
teachers or pastors.
Maybe, yeah, there's still some sort of disconnect here, because I don't think I'm understanding you properly still. So maybe it would be helpful if you define to me what do you mean by prophecy? Because...
Yeah, so...
Real quick, Eric,
Go ahead.
Would you say that gifts and prophecy always coincide?
Gifts and prophecy always...
Yeah.
Well, again, it depends on what you mean by prophecy here. Like, I want to hear from your guys' mouth what that means, because I could give different answers to... And I feel like we'd be talking past each other if we're thinking something different here.
Then I'll just let Jacob go ahead and with what he was saying, because it... Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Jacob. Sorry.
So, thanks, Nate. The prophecy is, in my understanding, a you could say a calling back to the covenant. It is a messenger. A prophet is a messenger that's sent by the Spirit of God, who their entire aim is to, in a sense, apply the covenant to the current people of God. So if you take Israel, for example, the prophet isn't the one that does foretells the future, or that goes and does crazy miracles only. Think about like Jonah. Okay. Jonah doesn't do any miracles. Things happen to him, crazy things happen to him, but he never does any miracles, right? He's still a prophet. Elijah has a message, but he never gives or at least not that I can think of. He doesn't give a foretelling of the future, but he's a prophet, right? So I'm essentializing the taking of the covenant and the calling back of the people to God to that the people of God to that covenant.
Okay.
That's the essence of prophecy to me.
I think, okay, if I'm understanding you correctly, I'm not sure that what you're saying poses a threat to what I'm saying.
Go ahead.
Because in that case, like, I think the answer to Nate's question would be that there can be that division. Because what you're saying, what you're referring to as prophecy essentially is equivalent to something like proclamation, I guess you could say. So they have a proclamation
Yes.
of certain perhaps events that are taking place at the current time. Maybe they have something in the future as well. And what you're saying is they don't need a miraculous sign to be able to authenticate that particular message because it's divorced.
Yes, but whereas, like, I do think there is subtle differences between, like, preaching, let's say, and prophecy, I do think that they're significantly overlapped. But for instance, I would say, a prophet is looking at their current context and saying, where are we not aligned to the covenant? Specifically, where are we not aligned to the covenant?
Yes.
And then making prescriptions and sometimes predictions based off of that, right? So I actually think that what was going on to some degree with even the foretellings of the prophets was that they were looking at the current events of their time, right? Assyria gaining power or things of that nature, and saying, listen, if you don't turn around, God is not going to protect you from the Assyrians, right? Like, this is not, and I think there was elements of divine foretelling as well. Like, I don't think that's missing. And I think it's something that can happen with prophecy. I just don't think it's the central aspect of prophecy.
Yeah, so we just kind of cut out there for a second. Sorry, guys.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, what I was just thinking about, Jacob, as you were talking, was, a prophet, somebody who is really versed in the word, who can look at their current community, and then based on what they know, they can make almost a diagnosis and then prescribe a solution. I was just, those medical terms started coming to my mind, like a doctor. And that was, just alarm bells are going off for a metaphor around some sort of doctor that's able to look at a person and an issue that's plaguing somebody and be able to, based on their knowledge, prescribe a solution that will bring them back into alignment, so to speak.
That's really good. I like that a lot.
So yeah, then I was going through, I was like, oh man, what other kind of job title could we give the other APAST? And that'd be a fun conversation for another time. But yeah, so as you're speaking, I mean, I think I'm in total agreement with you and your definition of prophet and kind of that doctor of the community.
Yeah.
So am I. Actually, what Jacob said is if I understood him correctly, is actually like 100% in line with something that was being taught to me by my Old Testament professor as well, in the way he describes prophecy. And so,
you did it, Jacob.
I have no problem with Jacob's definition of prophecy if I'm understanding him rightly. What I'm saying is that not necessarily that signs have to accompany prophecy for prophecy to be authentic. I'm more getting at the ordered nature of the sign when it's performed by the individual. And I'm saying that cannot be divorced from God's purpose for working that sign in the purpose or working that sign in the person as it's being performed. So when the individual goes out and he performs some miraculous type of sign, the sign itself is pointing to the message. I think I would say always. It's not just vacuous. It's not done for no purpose behind it. So because of that, what I'm saying is because of that reality of the ordered purpose of the sign, that God has a specific use for it within his prophetic messengers. And I'm saying that happened particularly to capital P and capital A apostles and prophets. That was the big purpose for it, was to authenticate a a I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, a biblical message, I think is maybe
Yeah.
the best way. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm saying that doesn't continue today because there is no longer capital A and P apostles and prophets. I think.
When you say that doesn't happen today, you're saying signs that then authenticate messages from God does not happen today.
Yeah, there's no more "Thus saith the Lord's" anymore.
To everybody, or just to, like, or even to individuals?
What do you mean by that?
Like, we pray sometimes, and we say, like, I've heard stories of people doing something similar to the Gideon test, right? In their life, and saying, like, God, I need a direction in my life. Which way should I go? And having something that they would consider miraculous, meaning symbolic, that points them to a message. So can it happen for individuals, or can it happen?
I see what you're getting at here. I'm trying to think of a way to respond to you without it getting overly semantical, because I could say to you something like, "There's no more direct revelation from God," but then like you can respond to that by saying that, you know, are we saying like the Holy Spirit doesn't communicate to people or something like that? And we can go down that rabbit hole. But like I think you would know what I mean when I say like there's no more like direct messages from God in the way that "Thus saith the Lord" operated in the Old Testament. Maybe that's the best way of saying it.
Okay, yeah. So there's always you could say there's always a degree of skepticism that we are maybe permitted to hold to things like that.
Yeah. So to give a practical example, maybe like the canon is closed. The scriptural canon is closed. Nobody's going to say "Thus saith the Lord" and be inscripturated any longer because of the final revelation of God's of God himself in Jesus Christ. It finished with Jesus Christ. So because of that, now we're kind of talking, just to note here as a quick note, we're talking about prophecy specifically here right now. There's no more, there's no more capital P prophecy. I don't think you could say anymore.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat.
Yeah.
I think what made the capital P prophets and the capital A apostles special is that they were, in large part, either their stories or their letters were inscripturated. And they held you could say, an overarching authority, God's authority. They held God's authority for the church and for Israel. So, like, it wasn't like God gave them some jurisdiction over the church, and like, but then there was other people that he also was kind of pulling in on the side. No, it's like the apostles were it at the time. The apostles were where the buck stopped for the church. In the same way with the prophets. Now, that didn't always mean the churches or the community of Israel listened, but they did have the authority. They were just rejecting, and this is really unfortunate, they were rejecting God's authority because it's direct. And I would say nowadays, the thing that has changed perhaps is that there's that the scriptures are the primary witness, and they're the primary authority, in the same way that the prophets and apostles, when they were alive, were the primary authority. So their inscripturations, what they chose to write down, is that's the authority for us. That's the library of definitions of what God revealed. And so to then say, like, prophecy and apostleship, if they happen today, their source material is the scriptures. They go to the scriptures first, and they're really it's a repetition of what's already been given. Now, I think there are times where specific images can repeat themselves in the church, and I think that you can use that people could use really obscure images from the scriptures like something out of the prophets or out of the Psalms or something like that, and apply it in a way that's really novel, because the scriptures are huge and they're really complicated. And so to say that the scriptures are our only authority is not to say that our authority is simple. It is a complicated beast, and I think that the way that prophets and apostles read scripture is to take the text and you almost apply it, or to bring the treasure therein to the community of the day. And I would say that prophets, for the most part, speak to the people of God, and apostles go out beyond the people of God to bring people in to the people of God. So the Apostle Paul, the reason we call him the Apostle Paul is he's one sent out, right? Sent out to go preach the message to the Gentiles, to those who who had not heard before, which is why I think apostleship can be considered missionary activity in today's understanding. Prophecy is like the prophets of Israel. They weren't prophets to, I mean, there are some instances where they're prophets to other nations, but for the most part, I think they were prophets to God's people. And even when they're prophets to other nations, they are prophets of Israel, and their writings are maintained and reread and preserved by Israel. They stand within the community, and in most places, if I'm remembering properly, they are speaking to Israel. Even if they're speaking to another nation, they then turn their eyes to Israel, somewhere else in the text.
Okay.
Sorry, that was long.
I lost you a little bit in there, but let me make sure I'm hearing you. Like what? Your main point. You're trying to get like at the proper understanding of what an apostle and a prophet is. Is that kind of what you're getting at there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And you're kind of pushing back on what I was saying because I have a more, like, I guess, rigid view of what apostle and prophet is. Is that what you're getting at? Okay.
A good way of saying it might be what one might consider scriptural usually is a lot narrower than what the scriptures actually offer. So I do think that where there is prophecy, where there is apostleship today, they have to draw on the Holy Scriptures. But I think that prophecy and apostleship can use the scriptures or read the scriptures in ways that are novel and interesting and pull attention to the community. In the same way that you might say that the prophets of Israel read the law and were well familiarized with the law, but didn't just repeat the law. They called the community back to the law and painted using pictures that were helpful for the time, right? To kind of create an affect of redevotion. So what I'm saying is I do think that the prophets and the apostles almost are like counter opposite offices or gifts. They go in different directions, right? Like I was saying, the prophets speak to the community, the apostles bring into the community from outside, right?
Okay.
But I think that both draw on the scriptures and both have a penchant for trying to make the scriptures connect to the community in a way that moves them. So it's not just teaching in the sense of like trying to parse the scriptures and systematize and form doctrine. It's not shepherding in the sense that like you're walking with people much in their own lives and offering small course corrections, you could say. The apostles and prophets, in my understanding, they have a kind of a novel way of interacting with both the scriptures and the community, which separates them from the other of APEST.
So I think something that might be, Eric, if I can try and articulate maybe something that's hanging us up, I think it's the distinction between the capital A apostles and the lowercase apostles, or just capital P prophets,
Yeah.
lowercase p prophets. I think that's
I'm picking that up. Yeah.
yeah. And Jacob, I love that what you're saying, because I think that gets at the core of what even a prophet is. But I think Eric in particular, maybe under that banner, there are capital P prophets used by God in the early days of the church to lay the foundation of the church for all history. And then there are lowercase prophets. Eric, would you agree that there's lowercase prophets, or would you say no, there's no lowercase
yeah,
prophets?
apostles and prophets. There's both lowercase. I think that's pretty obvious. I mean, they pop.
Okay.
There's plenty of both that are mentioned in both the Old and New Testament, but are never called out by name.
Totally.
So
Okay.
we don't know. Go
So
ahead.
there's the capital A, I'm getting my letters mixed up. There's capital P prophets, and or capital A apostles. We'll just because the capital A apostles, capital P prophets, they're the ones that laid the foundation of the church, and then lowercase p prophets. I'm just curious because I mean, so when did the gifts cease? If you would agree that there are lowercase prophets and apostles, like when did they stop being prophets, or when did they stop being prophets?
When the capital A apostles died, when the last one died.
So
So you would almost say that the apostles and prophets, and those words we've used so many times, they're almost starting to lose meaning.
Yeah.
It's okay.
The apostle, right? Like they don't sound right in your ears anymore. But like, so you're saying that let's say that there were apostles that were appointed at the time of Peter and Paul, that were lowercase a, like Junia or whatever. So if those people are, you're almost saying like they were designated as like almost an extension of the apostles in their time.
Yeah.
But not beyond that. Then once the apostles had died, Peter and Paul and all those guys, then there was no one else that could appoint
the gift was
apostles
stuck with
and
them,
prophets
essentially.
beyond that.
So
we don't have it. We don't have apostles and prophets
and
nowadays.
there's no way for us to have the gift because the gift was specifically designated to those capital A apostles.
This is getting murky, because I feel like we're still missing a link in the chain here. Even with
So
that line of
here's
questioning, there still feels like there's because look, in some sense, I'm willing to say that there's still apostles and prophets today. In some sense, like I'm just saying, there's a particular nature to the capital A's and P's, and that had accompanying miraculous things along with them to authenticate the capital A's and P's, like that died along with them is the basic thing that I'm trying to get at here. So I guess maybe this might be helpful to say, maybe not. If we're saying that the capital A's and P's are synonymous with the lowercase, and that the lowercase continues on today, then essentially what that's communicating to me is the foundation of Ephesians 2:20 is still being laid to this day. It's not laid past tense, as the text says, if that makes sense. So if you're saying those gifts,
not what I'm saying.
I would not say that, no.
No, the foundation, for me, the foundation is the scriptures. So that's the foundation of the church is the scriptures. So when they say the apostles and prophets, I actually think they mean those who would go on to, in their day, who would have authority over the communities, but also who in their day wrote down texts that would be preserved by the church and moved forward into as being the prophetic and apostolic lines of succession, right? So I would say that their writings are the cache of that foundation. They're the treasure trove of that foundation. They're the library, the founding document of our faith.
So
But even that gets confusing for me.
I know. I'm saying I'm not sure how you can say that. Like I'm not.
Why?
Because if you're saying, okay, maybe. Oh man, this is confusing. if you're saying,
this is tough. I wish we had like a board or something that we could map it out on.
if you're saying that
The listeners are 10 times ahead of us. They have already gotten it all
They're-
figured out. And,
hopefully,
like,
yeah.
these guys
They're
are
screaming
idiots.
at us,
They
yeah.
agree and they don't even know it.
I sure hope so. I actually really hope so.
Yeah.
Because if you're saying that prophecy continues today in the same way that it did in the Old and New Testament, like, the scriptures have to be open to today, I guess is what I'm getting at here.
No,
Like-
because what I was saying is that the capital A's and capital P's are the writers of scripture. That's what sets them apart from other types of A's and P's, is because they were scripturally.
Because they were inscripturated.
But
Yes.
where that gets confusing for me is just the timeline of documentation that we know of. You know, we know that the Gospels weren't recorded until the like until 77 AD or whatever was the first
50s
documentation.
to 70s,
Okay.
mid 70s, roughly. It's obviously it's debated among scholars.
Right. But even then there is a gap from Christ's time and the time of Acts to the time where it's actually all written down. So it's not like there was just a big break in between Christ's resurrection
Yeah.
and when the first manuscript was written. You know, like things were still happening
No.
there in that
For
time.
sure, yeah, and that's because the apostles and specifically the apostles were still alive.
Yeah.
So there didn't need to be documents because the apostles had living authority.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So that was my second part to it. Is it's not just that they're inscripturated, it's that they have authority over the community at the time,
Yeah.
and then are also inscripturated, and their scriptures have authority over the community ongoing.
Gotcha. And I think what
that make
Eric would
sense?
say is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Sure.
because of that, because they are in Scripture, they had authority while they lived, inscripturated, so that their words and teachings would live on past their life, that the apostles and prophets wouldn't continue beyond them because they are everything necessary for the foundation of the church. Does that make sense?
But the community still exists.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I would say maybe this is what you're saying, Dave, maybe not. I think what I would say is, like, in order for the apostles and so, like, they were going around preaching the message that you're talking about, functioning as apostles and prophets. Or let's just focus on the apostles, because that's really who we're talking about right now. They're functioning as apostles as they're moving around Palestine and Asia and things like that, wherever they were. But we're talking about the signs in particular. Like, those were used to authenticate that message. If they're just using words, like, they could be any random Joe on the side of the street, and yes, we would say, like, through the Spirit and grace of God, perhaps if God wanted to do it that way and have no signs and no miracles to authenticate that message, then he could have done so. Sure, granted. But that's not what we see, right? Those signs and miracles have the function of authenticating the message. And that I don't want to feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but, like, I'm just saying that can't be divorced. And if we're saying that the gifts continue, at least from my point of view, that the reason that you're saying the reason that they're inscripturated is because they're capital A and P apostles and prophets. But I'm saying for people to know that, the gifts accompanied them to affirm that very status and message. And so, in my mind, if that continues, there has to still be capital A and P prophets, because...
Oh, I'm understanding what... Oh, okay. I think I'm catching you.
Okay. Hopefully.
Okay, let me think about how to respond to that, because it's a good objection. So, I think this is where it's important to remember for me that signs authenticate revelation, but not necessarily the one that is revealing the things. Good example of this would be, like, was it Balaam? he speaks and is like, is unable to curse Israel, and basically has like kind of these like, I believe he has visions, right? At least he has he's stopped and spoken to in his spirit.
Some direct correspondence with God. Yeah.
Yes. I think that's revelation, but I don't think that authenticates Balaam as a prophet of God.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So signs authenticate, for me, they authenticate the message, not the messenger. Now, what authenticates the messenger for me is the fact of inscripturation. So the fact that the prophets wrote down what they wrote, and Israel maintained and preserved their texts, I think is the Spirit working through Israel to maintain the scriptures. Okay. The authentication is the discovery of scriptures, you could say. And that is the A and the P. Now we go back and we say they had authority in their time. And I do think that they had authority in their time. Their authority was not always recognized as authority. And that's where a lot of the apostles and prophets get crucified, or persecuted, or harassed, exiled. But after a while, their writings are revered. And I think so I do think that that is how I would maintain and for the apostles there's a secondary aspect. I don't know how to do this for the prophets. There's probably a way to do it in a parallel, but I'm not sure how to do this for the prophets. But I know that for the apostles, they were literally elected by Jesus. So when I think the importance of the apostles and like their status as apostles is founded first and foremost on them being chosen by Jesus. And if nobody acknowledged their message for the rest of history, and everybody persecuted them and sent them out, they would still be apostles, because Jesus chose them as the ones he would send out, right? So that's the primary for me. Now, what that allows me to say is that there could be somebody who is a lowercase a or lowercase p apostle or prophet who is bearing witness to the covenant to either a people outside of God's people or a people within it, and they may have a sign accompany them in the midst of that, but that sign doesn't validate them in particular as some sort of like holy person or as an authority, but rather the message itself as the authority. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd have to chew on it more. I'd like to maybe not here, not now. Read the Balaam account, and because I don't know that Balaam ever said "Thus saith the Lord" or something like that. Did he?
No, and that wasn't really my point in all that. It was just to say, I think revelation can happen to somebody, and like weird signs and visions and stuff like that, like what happened with Balaam and the donkey would be a specific example there of the sign, right? That does not automatically authenticate the messenger. That's the important part. Yeah. The sorcerers in Pharaoh's courts were able to do the same miracles that Moses was. Mm-hmm. Moses, his miracle trumped theirs, mm-hmm. but the fact that they were able to do signs and symbols, mm-hmm. And miracles should not make us think, well, they must have had some sort of authority, right? That's not. I don't think that that's a one for one.
Mm.
Yeah, it was a long and convoluted and strange conversation to get to that nugget, Jacob. I think that distinction really kind of broke it open for me. I think that was important.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think like I said, I think people nowadays, this allows me to say there are things that happen that are signs, miracles, I think, that happen today. somebody's miraculously healed, someone has some really weird coincidence kind of thing happen, and like even things that like I would say are borderline supernatural beyond just coincidences, right? Like I would say there are things where you almost can't explain it except for by divine power. And I would say that those people can at the same time be bearing the message of the gospel, and that doesn't make them some sort of like prophet in the Joseph Smith sense, where they get to go found their own, weird cultish. Because that's really the apostles and prophets. That was never their aim either. It was always to point people back to God, right? It was the message. It was never the fame or some sort of notoriety or authority. It was always a borrowed and utilitarian authority, an authority to bring people back to God.
Yeah, I hear everything you're saying. I'm just not sure I agree. Off the top of my head.
Okay, that's fine.
Because I'm just not sure that's right. Like, your point about like it doesn't necessarily authenticate the messenger. I'm just not sure I agree with that. Like, I think
distinguish the
biblically,
message or the messenger.
Yes.
A good example is let's go to is it 2 Kings 17 or 22? I can't remember. It's the prophets of Baal. Let's go to that passage really fast before we close. I think this will help you understand what I'm saying a little bit better. Oh no, that's God.
Yeah. No, I heard what you're saying with that, and with Moses. I get what you're saying. They're doing something that seems supernatural, right? And what you're saying is because they're doing something supernatural, their supernatural work isn't like authenticating them as messengers of God because they're wicked people, because the Bible says they're wicked people, right?
Yeah. No, so actually what I wanted to point to in 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 36 is where it starts. At the time of the offering of oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you've turned their hearts back. So I think then this is right before the fires fall and the prophets of Baal are slaughtered. So I think what he's saying is he's not trying to prove that, like, solely that he is the messenger of God. He's trying to prove that God has a message for Israel and that they need to listen, right? So that you're turning their hearts back to you. That's the real essence. And he does say, and that I am your servant, but it's a utilitarian, it's literally service, right? It's not, I am your spokesperson. It's I am doing what you've told me to do.
Yeah. Nobody denies that God can get his message out via whatever means that he wants to. The messenger isn't a necessity, as I think you're trying to highlight here. Like, God can get his message out. I still don't think you can divorce the messenger part, because that's the way in which God seems to operate, like, consistently throughout the Bible. Like, I'm still not seeing this as a refutation, is what I'm saying. Like,
but Eric, it sounds like what you're saying is that somebody who, like, a prophet who is able to perform a miracle is then, like, known as an authority, and the person is an accepted authority, and that there's something different about that person, and like
the messenger himself can be a signpost. So the sign is not meant to point to the messenger, like, necessarily. Like, it points beyond that to Christ,
right? To
for
the message.
Sure. So, like, yeah, don't misunderstand me there.
Yeah.
But, like, the question is like, the message, or the point I'm trying to make here is, like, the messenger, like, still matters, and has to matter in some sense, like, because we have to know what message is true, and the signs are meant to authenticate what message is true. I think is, man, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it.
But the way that you just said it
Uh-huh.
undercut the messenger.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
Jacob was
so-
saying.
I'm saying if it's some villain in prison who says the gospel and then has a like some sort of crazy sign that follows him, that doesn't mean go and do everything that criminal says because he's Lord now.
Right.
Right. It
Yeah.
means
Messenger of God.
it means his message was from God.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm just gonna have to think of a better way to say
But-
what I'm thinking, but
But the thing that can also be said is that there are people outside of signs and symbols who can, who outside of the people of God who can use signs and symbols as chicanery. There are like magic. I do believe is a real thing, right? So people can do things like I think if David Blaine was walking around in the ancient Near East, people probably would have been like, dude, this guy has some sort of like divine power on his side, right? So here's what I'm trying to say with all that is it's not the sign is not the end all be all to define what is God's word and what isn't, but it does give you an indication. And I think that so this is a passage that I could use to kind of close us, because I gotta help my sister move in just a few minutes
yeah,
here.
that's fine.
But this has been a great conversation. This is in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 19. Do not quench the spirit, do not despise prophecies, but test everything. Hold fast to what is good. So don't despise prophecies, right? Don't see them as something to be looked down on, because I think it would be really easy to be like, I don't want some dude telling me what to do or telling me what God has for me. But then he says, I think the crucial part, which is to test everything, and whether that means to test them by the Spirit of God, or to test them according to the Scriptures and what we know of God from the Scriptures, to test them according to the Spirit of Jesus Christ and who He is and His character. I mean, there's a lot of ways you could interpret. I think they all kind of will actually align, the three of those, but I think that's the essence is you're not free from testing. You have to test all signs, all symbols, all prophecies, anything that comes claiming to be from God. There has to be testing, because otherwise you end up with Joseph Smith.
Yes, I'm willing to cut it off here, and maybe we'll have to do another episode. But yeah, I feel like if I just say something, it'll confer more conversations.
That's good. All right. Well, thanks for this restraint, Eric. I know I've kind of ended with the last word there, and I don't feel great about that. But
oh, it's fine. Yeah, you make a good point. I don't deny that. But yeah, there's still, I think, more to be said.
Think more on it. I'll think more on it. We'll come back together. Nate, keep thinking about it, and we'll come back and rehash this out maybe on a third episode.
Fight.
But thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Triclinium. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can do so at sophomorosofficial@gmail.com. That's SOPHOMOROS official@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, any topics to suggest or any pushback on this episode or any comments if something struck you. We would love to hear it. If you'd rate our podcast, that would be interesting. I've never asked for that before, but I just realized, I was like, we've never asked for that. So maybe think about it. And
if
it's
you
okay
liked it,
if it's a 1-star.
Give us a 5-star. If you didn't like it, reach out to us at Sophomore.
Yeah, reach out to us and tell us about it, but don't rate us. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, maybe we'll get all 1-stars, and that would be really fascinating. But we love you all, and as always, may Christ be exalted.